Good evening, YouTube. My name is Will, and I am going to be talking to you today about Black Sabbath. This is part 2 in my trilogy of videos discussing the studio albums by the band. Part 1 was on the 1970s, and now today we'll be talking about the Black Sabbath albums of the 1980s. As you know, I'm going through all the albums in a chronological order, giving my thoughts on the albums, giving a little bit of background on the albums as well, and what was going on in the band's history at the time, and also giving my own personal ranking. As you know, I'm doing it chronological because some of the people who do these album rankings on YouTube and on other forms of video platform tend to do them in least favourite to the most favourite, or do a certain section, like say for example the Ozzy Osbourne periods or the Dio years. I'm going to be covering all the albums across all the decades of all the different lineups. Okay, right then, well, so Black Sabbath in the 1980s, they kick off by basically firing longtime singer Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy himself goes on to have a massive studio catalogue himself as a solo artist, and has a very big career out of it, discovering guitar players such as Randy Rhoads, Zakk Wylde, Jakey Lee and so on. Meanwhile, Black Sabbath continues without Ozzy, and they start off by hiring one of, perhaps I believe, so from a technical standpoint and in terms of a sort of distinction, perhaps their best vocalist they've ever had, and that is in Ronnie James Dio. Ronnie James Dio just come from the band Rainbow, led by Ritchie Blackmore, and on and off throughout his time when he's in and out of Black Sabbath, he's then running a solo band under his own name, simply called Dio. So, 1980 brought us the first album from the Black Sabbath of the 1980s, the post-Ozzy Osbourne years, and that is perhaps one of my favourite all-time Black Sabbath albums, and that of course is Heaven and Hell. What can I say about Heaven and Hell? Very much like Masters of Reality, it is one of Dio's albums that just spoke to me the moment I got into it, the moment I listened to it. It's got 8 amazing tracks on here. It's got Neon Nights, you've got the self-titled song, you've got Die Young, you've got Children of the Sea as well. These have all been staples within the Dio catalogue as well. At this point, when Ronnie James Dio came into the band, he brought a new songwriter into the group. He wrote a fair amount of the lyrics, very much pulling on the lyrics style he wrote with Rainbow, talking about the medieval topics, or a lot of the topics that now a lot of power metal bands comment on in their own songs, mainly because he's also considered the godfather of power metal. Otherwise though, it's still Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler and Bill Ward. This album is definitely one of the quintessential and essential listenings for the Black Sabbath catalogue when you're looking about the entire discography. The album cover is also incredible as well. I'll throw it to you again. As you can see, it is angels, but they're all smoking on that, which is a pretty cool. I've always thought it was pretty cool anyway. Kind of like the angel being the resident of the heaven, but you can see they're actually also playing cards and smoking. It's representing the other side of the story. Tony Iommi's guitar riffing is incredible on this. Heaven and Hell is the rap riff on there. I think it's just as iconic as anything from, say, Iron Man or Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And it is, like I said, it's one of the most important albums you can listen to from the entire catalogue. I personally give it a 9.5 out of 10. It is that good. It's one of my all-time favourite albums, let alone just one of my all-time favourite Black Sabbath albums. The only weak song for me on this is Walk Away, but the rest of the tracks are very strong. Lady Evil is a great song. Lonely is the Word is a song that I think is a little bit rather underrated. Wishing Well's got a really nice kind of chorus to it. And also the production values of it sound very crisp, very modern, for modern of the era anyway, and I think became to define the sound. And with this new era of Black Sabbath, this is when you saw a change in the songwriting, not because Ronnie James Dio is adding a new hand, but they're no longer doing this very kind of experimental, kind of proggy, very doomy sound. They're heading more towards what was going on at the era, very similar to contemporaries such as Judas Priest. Iron Maiden is out at this point, Motorhead is around, of course Ozzy Osbourne releases Blizzard of Oz this year in 1980, so they're kind of all in that kind of fold. I think of all the albums of the 80s, this is still the best one as well, but that doesn't mean there weren't any rubbish ones either from that one, or say not so good ones. After 1980 and the Heaven and Hell and the tour that followed it, Bill Ward decided to leave the band, feeling that all the drink and the drugs and the excess that goes with being a touring musician was getting too much. So they bring in Vinny Appice on drums. He is the younger brother of Carmine Appice, who had been in Blue Cheer, was it? Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'll get that fact checked. But he's also the drummer that influenced John Bonham from Led Zeppelin, so quintessential drummer, and he's his influence in his younger brother. But Vinny Appice had a bit more of a hit and a bit more of an attack into his music. So they follow up with 1981's The Mob Rules. Apart from being a very unique album cover in the Black Sabbath canon, it's the one that's probably got the most going on in the actual cover itself. You've got the cloaked figures, the kind of crazy kind of door with the bloodshed attack, very much a mob on the album cover. It is a great follow-up to Heaven and Hell, very much follows in that sort of similar guides in terms of the production sound, the ways the songs are written, and how actually the album is very nicely kind of mixed and catalogued in terms of the song order. Songs on here to definitely highlight is obviously the title track, Mob Rules, is a great mid-album epic. As is Country Girl. Sign of the Southern Cross is, I think, one of the best songs rather from the Dio era of Black Sabbath. A couple of songs I'm not too keen on. Over and Over never really did anything for me. Slipping Away was a song I'd never really got into. I've always found Voodoo a bit of a hit or miss. But ultimately though, it is another really strong album from the Dio era of Black Sabbath. So I would personally give Mob Rules maybe a 6.75 out of 10 to be pedantic. It's a really good album. It's not as good as Heaven and Hell, but it's not a bad record by a stretch of imagination. We actually will see this particular lineup come back up a few times into the future, but we'll get round to those when we come across those records. So at this point though, everything seems to be going really well in the Black Sabbath canon, and the lineup was doing well. The tour for the Mob Rules tour was really good as well. Very prosperous. It seems like Black Sabbath still felt quite relevant. And then to kind of cement this, they released the Live Evil live album. Now, it's an album I've never personally listened to that much, but it is a record that is very significant, both within the current discography, but also in terms of the history of the band, because it's basically the live album that breaks up the original Dio era of Sabbath. Because the production engineer was telling Iommi and Geezer Butler that Dio and Vinny Appice was coming in and remixing the album to make their bits sound louder than theirs and vice versa, and it was just constant backs and forwards, and it ultimately broke up the band. And with Dio and Appice going off to form Brian James Dio's solo band Dio, and Iommi and Butler staying in the Black Sabbath camp. So needing to reform the band, Bill Ward comes back into the fold to record the next album, and they end up hiring, after an alleged drunken evening in a pub with him, Ian Gillan, who formerly from Deep Purple. And they get together and they form a bit of a weird outlier in the Black Sabbath discography. They come out with 1983's Born Again. And apart from the very strange album cover, there's kind of red with the baby and the kind of odd contrast of the red baby with the blue background, it's a very peculiar record in the sense that it doesn't really have a strong production value, so it's very underproduced kind of sound to it. You can actually hear the influence that this album would have had on the Norwegian black metal scene of the early 90s in terms of that very lo-fi production value. My thoughts on this album is I can understand why people like it, but I personally don't. It's not one I really go back to too much. I mean, Disturbing the Priest and Zero the Hero are pretty good songs. Trash has got quite kind of a cool riff, but really the rest of the record doesn't do too much for me. It's not because I don't like Ian Gillan's voice. Ian Gillan's a great singer. I love the Deep Purple albums he's done. Machine Head, In Rock, Perfect Strangers as well. It was a great album. But I just don't think it fitted in the confines of Black Sabbath. I personally give this record maybe a 6 out of 10, just because it's just, actually no, I give this album probably like a 5 out of 10. It's not terrible, it's not technical ecstasy, Never Say Die sort of level, but it's still not strong compared to the first 5 albums or Heaven and Hell. It is still kind of a bit of a meandering kind of one for me. After recording of the album, Bill Ward decides he doesn't want to go on tour, so they end up bringing Bev Bevan to do the tour as a drummer. But then after that tour, Ian Gillan goes back to Deep Purple reform, Bevan goes off and does other projects. So then it kind of leaves Black Sabbath kind of back in this holding pattern for a few years, and apart from a one-off original lineup reunion tour at the Live Aid concert, Iommi is left as the sole original member with the ownership of the band name to use. So after that Live Aid concert, he decides he actually wants to put out a solo album, something very different to what he's done with Black Sabbath 4, not as doomy, not as metal, as it were. And he actually goes about forming a pretty decent, or almost all-star team of musicians to back him. On keyboards, he's got the long-time Black Sabbath unofficial keyboards Jeff Nichols, who pops up later on to the Black Sabbath canon as well. He's actually a very important, underrated member to the survival of the band throughout the 80s and 90s. He hires in Eric Singer on the drums, who go on to most notably play in Kiss, and he has done so on and off for the last 30 years. Bass player Dave Spitz, who is the brother of Anthrax's Danny Spitz. And on vocals, he gets Glenn Hughes, also of Deep Purple fame, and also had a bit of a solo career leading up to the release of the next album. So, the album they released is called Seventh Star. The reason why it's included in this list is because the record company wanted to market it as a Black Sabbath album, but because Tony Iommi wanted it to be a solo record, they compromised and called it Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi, Seventh Star. This album is actually really good, in my opinion. Objectively speaking, it is actually a strong, very good rock album. But because it wasn't meant to be, it doesn't sound like a good Black Sabbath album. There are some very good songs here. No Stranger to Love is a good ballad. Danger Zone is a really good song, not to be confused with Danger Zone from Top Gun. Two very different tracks, but still a very good song. Heart Like a Wheel and the title track are also good as well. But ultimately, though, it's still not a particularly strong record compared to the other Black Sabbath albums. But I would still definitely give it a respectable 6 out of 10. It's something unique to listen to because it's a Black Sabbath album, but it's a very bluesy, a bit more of an arena rock, radio-friendly kind of record. But everyone who plays on this album still sounds great, through and through. That's my 4 and 7 stars, 6 out of 10. Good album, but not a Black Sabbath record. They do go on tour with the 7 Star album, but after about 3 shows, Glenn Hughes and insane cocaine addiction gets in the way, and so they end up having to replace him with a chap called Ray Gillan for the rest of the tour. Ray Gillan actually again has a voice very similar to Glenn Hughes and a little bit like Ronnie James Dio, but he, after a year or so with the band, and actually records a version of the next album, decides to leave and go off and form a band with Eric Singer called Badlands, and Jakey Lee from Ozzy Osbourne's band, I believe, as well. So after recording a version of the next record, Tony Iommi then had to bring in effectively a whole new band, but other than Jeff Nichols. Jeff Nichols stays with him from 7 Star and continues on. And so they bring in singer Tony Martin, who has proved to be perhaps the second most consistent, or the second most appearing singer with Black Sabbath. They bring Bob Daisley from Rainbow, and they bring in Bevan back in from who had previously voiced him on the Born Again tour, and they produce the Eternal Idol. And if you get the deluxe edition, like I have got, you also get the Ray Gillan version as well. But I will be reviewing solely the original album as it was released. This is a really good album, Eternal Idols. It has a lot to be said about it. I think The Shining is a great song. Scarlet Pimpernel is also another great track on there. Again, this was actually almost like a nice kind of rebirth of the band, in the sense that, after a couple of albums of being hit or miss, they seem to have a lot of really strong and dedicated songs to the actual Black Sabbath continuum. Tony Martin does a great vocal production on this album as well, which is also handy, and it helps kind of keep his longevity. Ultimately, though, I actually would give it a 6.5 out of 10 because there are still quite a few weak tracks. I wasn't too much a fan of like Hard Life to Love, wasn't too into Lost Forever either. And it is an album that, apart from a few of the big riffs on there, I do just tend to forget about, generally speaking. But it's still a good album overall. So it do deserves a 6.5 out of 10, but it's definitely not as strong as some of the previous records. But it kind of gives new momentum to the band, you know, because now Tony Martin is going to be a consistent member for quite a few records on and off. Jeff Nichols stays in the band, and Tony Iommi still there as the consistent anchor to it all. And then for the next record, they actually bring in drummer Cozy Powell on Rainbow, and I believe he was also in Whitesnake, into the fold to kind of help solidify more of the band. Couldn't find a bass player, so they used Lawrence Kossel, who's a session musician, jazz musician by trade. But at the actual release, again, this is the other of the two or three albums Black Sabbath that I will fight people over as being really good, and that is 1989's Headless Cross. My thoughts on Headless Cross, as I said, it's one of my favourite albums. To get the ranking out of the way, I would give it a good 8 out of 10. I think it absolutely deserves it. The title track is, I think, a classic Black Sabbath album, one gets underrated. Black Moon, Weighing Death Calls featuring Brian May from Queen, again, also really strong tracks on here. It's not perfect, definitely not in a Kill in the Spirit world. I've always found to be a bit of a strange AOR radio-friendly track with this kind of weird bridge to it. Call the Wild, it's one that tends to somewhat kind of skip over. But you know, it's actually a really good album overall. It actually flows really nicely, kind of like Heaven and Hell, kind of like Masters of Reality, kind of like Paranoid. It has a really nice kind of flow and a consistency to it, so you're not waiting for the song to end and then kind of move on with the next track, as it were. And yeah, it's the first album on IRS after spending the previous albums all on Warner Brothers or Vertigo. So it doesn't do as well in America, but it does do really well across Europe as well, and it does keep the band going through the ages. You know, and this lineup does continue on to the next records, which we'll get into the next video. We do now skip into the 1990s. So, like I said, I recommend anyone who hasn't listened to this album to go and check it out, because it is really good. It's got a lot of gems on it. You know, it's obviously not for the Black Sabbath purists who love the original lineup, but it is a really good record. And that's where we leave off then for this video. We will be heading into the 1990s and beyond for part 3. Once again, please do subscribe, please do share the video, please do comment, please do like. If you have not watched part 1 is us on the channel as well, so you can have a look what I think of Black Sabbath, Pretty Never Say Die. And yeah, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in part 3.